welcome to In Search of the Crystal Skull, an epic adventure into the world of mediocrity. My name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And today we're going to do something very unique. So, the background to this is there's actually two reasons why we're doing this. The first one is because originally, when we first did In Search of the Crystal Skull, one of the videos we really wanted to do, or one of the podcasts we really wanted to do, was a comparison between It's a Mad World and Rad Race. But unfortunately, Rad Race is no longer in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, In Search of the Crystal Skull territory, so we can't review that movie because it doesn't rate the same way on Tomatometer as the way that It's Mad World did. So we had to find other movies to do this and to do a versus, if you will. So today we actually found a great way to round off Nicktoons Movie Month, which is going to be we're going to be looking at the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, and we're going to be putting up it towards the SpongeBob Sponge Out of Water movie. So that's the reverse reason we're kind of doing this. The second reason we're doing this is because there's this ongoing thing about me that apparently I have some kind of like hatred or some kind of like, negativity towards SpongeBob SquarePants. So I thought that maybe this would be the perfect place to kind of just address all of that. So here's the thing. So for those of you who do not know, SpongeBob SquarePants is probably the biggest cartoon, probably since The Simpsons, to ever hit American and probably even hit worldwide airwaves. It has billions of fans. It has merchandise. It's what's keeping Nickelodeon as a thing in 2022, and has been doing so for a very long time. SpongeBob is a recognizable character. He's pretty much up there nearly with Mickey Mouse, I would say, but I think that's going to be a debate in itself. But he is one of the recognized mascots in the world, and he has basically done it all. He has written books. He has been on he's done his cartoon show, he's basically been in movies, as we're about to talk to today, and he basically just has a ton of merchandise, a ton of notoriety, and has a ton of fans. And so I take none of that away from him, and SpongeBob SquarePants has been a phenomenon pretty much since its inception back in the 90s. Where me and SpongeBob SquarePants differ, at least in the way that I feel about this show, is that it has been going on for way too long. It has been basically just, I feel like now it's just, gone into the same place that, The Simpsons is right now. Like, we call it Zombie Simpsons, if you will. Now, there is some arguments that the newer episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants are significantly better than the ones that have come before it. But, in my opinion, it should have been a show that should have probably gone a good couple of seasons, and then that should have been it, really. And it should have just been revisited in nostalgia, in my opinion. And other cartoon shows should have had a chance to kind of just, make their headway into this. Or maybe the should have been a time when SpongeBob SquarePants should have been allowed to reinvent itself, or, maybe have like spin-off shows, if you will, and, we just kind of went in a different direction, but it doesn't. It's pretty much the same formula that has been entire time.
Here's the thing that I'm sure that a lot of SpongeBob fans already know. You see, the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie, this was supposed to be the series finale. This was supposed to be the one to close everything off, because not Steven Spielberg. What am I talking about? Steven Hillenburg.
Sorry, babe. Before we get into that, I mean, I just want to kind of round off basically this whole thing about me not liking SpongeBob SquarePants. So, before we get into that, so here's the thing about this, just to put a nail on this, and so that basically this is now encased in gold and is now up there for everyone to know. So it's not the fact that I don't dislike SpongeBob SquarePants. I just don't like it just being there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I want some variety in my life. Disney right now did Gravity Falls. Disney did The Owl House. Disney's done Monsters at Work for better or worse. And Disney is, doing The Ghost of Molly McGee. And, Disney is doing various other different shows. And also Cartoon Network also was doing exactly the same thing as well. Nickelodeon has not really differed away, besides The Loud House and, some other shows that, as of this podcast, the Casa Grandes recently said that it's now been, ended, after 3 seasons, because this is another thing as well, which I don't particularly feel like I have negativity towards SpongeBob SquarePants, is that Nickelodeon constantly, puts shows up towards SpongeBob SquarePants and says, does this measure up to that? No? Okay, you're done. And it just feels like that's the way Nickelodeon has been operating, since the beginning, where that SpongeBob SquarePants has been been there. And so, that's my beef with SpongeBob SquarePants in regards to that. Now, is it a good show? Of course it is. I do urge people to, watch it because, it is Nickelodeon's strongest show. But in regards to the reasons I don't like it, I mean, I pretty much just highlighted them out. So, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's a show that's gone a long time, it's had its run, and I feel like now Nickelodeon should move on and move on to onto newer things. And that's just how I feel about it. If you like SpongeBob SquarePants, that's great. But in regards to myself, I mean, I just feel like it is something that is good, but at the same time, I feel like I want some variety in my life, and I don't feel like I want SpongeBob SquarePants all the time, every single day. And that's just how I feel
now
about
it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because as of yesterday when I was checking on Twitter, somebody made a pie chart of like, these are the shows that are currently airing on Nickelodeon, and according to the schedule, 50% of it is just SpongeBob, and the other 46% is like movies and TV specials, and then the rest of them are like the Loud House, the Casa Grandes, Bilbo's Post, It's Pony, and then there's a new show that's going to be coming out, Big Nate, which is based off a book series, and then the Rugrats reboot. So yeah, basically like 5% is like these newer shows, 46% is like movies and specials, and some of it not even Nickelodeon owned, and then the other one is just SpongeBob, which is like half of its schedule.
Exactly. So if you like SpongeBob, good for you. But in regards to that, I want some variety in my life. And I feel like with other places that I go right now on Disney Plus and various other places, that's where I feel like I'm getting right now. So, but anyway, now that I've got that out of the way, and I want to let's now focus on what we're going to be talking about today. So, we are going to be focusing on we are going to be comparing the SpongeBob SquarePants movie to SpongeBob Sponge Out of Water, and so
that will be like a comparison to two movies that came out a decade apart. So I guess let's go into the first movie first, in terms of like behind the scenes stories. As I mentioned earlier, that this was supposed to be the finale of SpongeBob. It had 3 seasons, it was very successful, and Steven Hillenburg wanted to conclude it with this movie. But 2004 was a very interesting year for Nickelodeon, because as you guys know, the Klasky Chupo reign was pretty much over. The original Rugrats series, Rocket Power, The Wild Thornberrys, As Told by Ginger, all ended in 2004. And Rugrats was its major cash cow for almost 15 years, and we discussed about that when we talked about Rugrats in Paris. So I feel like when they saw how big that the SpongeBob SquarePants movie was, that they were like, no, we don't want to cancel this. Even after Steven Hillenburg left, they still made SpongeBob seasons, even still to this very day. Instead of Steven Hillenburg being like the main showrunner, it was Paul Tibbitt who took over. And then a lot of the crucial writers and animators and storyboard artists who worked on SpongeBob also left as well. Some of them left to do shows such as Gravity Falls and Samurai Jack and various other properties, because they were suffering from massive burnout and they felt that there was no new ideas that they could bring into SpongeBob. And so, yeah, there's been a debate about, if SpongeBob killed Nickelodeon, but that's not neither here or there we're going to be talking about. We're talking about the first movie. So when I saw the premise of SpongeBob SquarePants, the movie, in terms of like, okay, this is going to be like the big adventure that they're promoting this as. It's like, SpongeBob is going to be driving the Krabby Patty Mobile, and Plankton finally succeeded in capturing the secret formula and taking over Bikini Bottom, and then we have David Hasselhoff as a cameo. So a lot of people were genuinely excited about this movie. And I remember that a lot of people, even still to this day, they call SpongeBob SquarePants the movie like one of their most favorite animated movies that they watched as kids.
Oh, sorry, I didn't very properly there. So, in regards to the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, I mean, like, if we're gonna, so should we talk about one first, and then we'll talk about the other one after that, or is that how we're
yes,
go
absolutely,
right?
yeah. So,
okay.
the movie begins. So, I like the cold open of the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie, where it features the singing pirates, and the premise of this is that they're going to go see the SpongeBob SquarePants movie in the theater. So, it's very meta. In which, okay, we're going to have a group of pirates, and they're singing the SpongeBob SquarePants theme song, and then they're rushing over to the theater, and then the movie plays out. And then we have this really cool sequence with SpongeBob and going over to the Krusty Krab and, being like a badass, where he's basically just, helping everybody out, and he's like going over to a particular person who says that he has a Krabby Patty, but there's no cheese. Oh no, shock, surprise. And so then he decides to like treat it really seriously. Like he gets his briefcase and then he pulls out a slice of cheese and then he sensitively puts it up there while the customer's like really crying and he's panicking, and they treat it really, really seriously. And then it just turns out it was a dream sequence, because of course it is. I mean, if SpongeBob were to have an opening like that where it was legit, I'd be like, wow, SpongeBob, you really matured since then. You treat this like it's a legit, like it was almost like if you were working in a hospital or something. So, then we got into like the classic montage with him getting himself ready, which you would see in a lot of early episodes of SpongeBob. And then there's the announcement about the Krusty Krab 2, which is basically a new opening of the Krusty Krab so they can be able to expand Bikini Bottom. The only difference is that it's next door because, let's rip off Starbucks, in which, like, there's a Starbucks in every corner, like it was back then, in which, like, becomes, like, really oversaturated. So maybe there was a joke on that. I'm not sure, but
I think that's what they were going for when they were doing that. Yeah. So, but I think, but in regards to, I mean, sorry, you want to keep on going on with the story and.
Okay, yeah. Let me get to like the main conflict. So. The reason why SpongeBob is really excited about the opening of the Krusty Krab 2 is because they're going to choose a new manager for that one. And he thinks that he's going to be the one to do it because he was Employee of the Month for who knows how long. And he thinks he's a shoo-in. But it turns out it was Squidward who was chosen to be, the manager of the Krusty Krab 2. And then Mr. Krabs tells him, you can't because you're just a kid. And you're not responsible and you're not mature enough to run an establishment like the Krusty Krab 2. And so this is one of our first conflicts that we see in the movie.
Mm-hmm. So, in regards to our open, I mean, I don't really actually fault it all that too much because, like, it would be kind of like, you keep in mind, like, it does start with, like, the typical, like, you would go into a SpongeBob episode and it would go, like, the narrator is already, doing his spiel that he would do for the episode when it opens up. But then, obviously, it then cuts into, like, this kind of, like, this action, kind of like, 24 kind of like, kind of scene, with John Bauer to actually be there. But, like, at the end of the day, it's, the way that they open it up is actually, is very unexpected. And actually, that is a good way to kind of, like, start what I would consider the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. So, it's obviously all the dream, and which, obviously it is, and that actually plays to that. And and then, in regards to, like, opening the Krusty Krab 2, I mean, in regards to the way we start off the story, I mean, I can't really fault it all that much because it's going to be, at least it looks like it's progressing the SpongeBob story from that. So, like, because, like, hey, there's a second, Krusty Krab that's going to be opening up, and someone's going to need to be responsible for it. So, I wonder who it's going to be, for that. And SpongeBob SquarePants, I think, is banking on it being him because he's been such a loyal employee to Mr. Krabs. And, that's actually a thing that actually the audience can go along with because, everyone wants to see SpongeBob, succeed, and he's got every reason to be so. He's been Employee of the Month pretty much every single month since he's been there.
Exactly. I mean, that was a whole episode of that in the early season of SpongeBob where, he wants to be Employee of the Month. He's really taking it seriously while Squidward doesn't really remotely care until SpongeBob pushes him too far. And then Squidward's like, yeah, I'm going to be the one who's Employee of the Month. So, yeah, there was an entire episode dedicated to that.
Yeah. The one thing I don't particularly like about it, though, is that this opening, I mean, unless you're a fan of the show, you really don't know what's going on. Like, and that's the one thing I always, I'm always critical about movies of, is that unless it's going to basically explain the world that you're being thrown into, like, you can't just put a movie out there and just expect everybody to know what's going on. You can't. Like, you need to kind of explain what is going on here. And in fact, I don't know, maybe we should try and switch this up a little bit. Maybe instead of, like, talking about one and then talking about the other, I think maybe we, like, because there's one comparison, that Sponge Out of Water did that the original SpongeBob SquarePants movie didn't do, and that is that, it actually explained what the SpongeBob SquarePants story was in the second movie, and it didn't do that in the first movie.
And that's the thing, because you could argue that with the second SpongeBob SquarePants movie, you wouldn't need an intro because, SpongeBob at that point was around for almost 15 years and, it's become a major pop culture icon, and you would think that everybody has watched it, but you have to say that maybe there's some kids who have not watched SpongeBob. And so that was able to be really well in terms of the introduction, with having Burger Beard reading off to the seagulls the story about SpongeBob SquarePants and explaining about, like, this is SpongeBob SquarePants, and he's naive and he's optimistic and he works at a burger joint called the Krusty Krab and everybody loves it and Plankton's trying to steal the secret formula. So yeah, it explains the plot of the show in a very quick and very easy way, which is what you should do. Even just because a show has been running for so long, you can't just assume that everybody's going to know about it immediately when they see it in the theater, especially for those who have never seen it. That's why we criticize Rugrats in Paris for that reason, is because even though that there was a few seconds where it explained about Chucky's mom and all that kind of stuff, as for like the other characters and such, I mean, it wasn't really explained well, and you really don't know the jokes and the context unless you've seen the show. But but Sponge Out of Water was able to do it in a way that was really smart. They did this with the Jungle Movie. They did this with Static Claim. They did this amazingly with Enter the Florpus. So I think that now they're just getting that, yeah, even though that you have a theatrical movie based off of a really, really popular animated series or live action show or whatever that they're adapting, you need to ease the audience in with an origin story.
Yeah,
that way they can...
The one thing I would say, though, about in defense of Rugrats in Paris, I mean, keep this in mind, this was the second movie. I mean, there was the Rugrats movie before this. So, like...
Yeah,
I mean,
but here's the thing. Sponge Out of Water was the second SpongeBob movie, and
I would argue that the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie should have done what the second SpongeBob SquarePants movie should have done. I mean, that was the point I was trying to make, really. Like, it's just like...
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. So
I mean,
basically, both openings, I mean, of the movies, I mean, are drastically different. I mean, like, one just throws you in, and then the next one actually explains what this world is before you actually end up getting into the story. Which really is, like, the second movie, I would say, I think in regards to its open, I think is a bit more responsible than I think the first movie is. So I'll give it that.
Yeah. Now, let's go into the conflicts of both movies. So the conflict of the first movie was that Plankton had tried every single plan to steal the Krabby Patty formula, except for Plan Z, which he didn't even know existed. And so he finds Plan Z, and the plan was to take over Bikini Bottom by giving away free chum bucket helmets and then controlling them in his tower. And the whole point of it is that the reason why he's doing this is because he wants to blame Mr. Krabs for stealing King Neptune's crown, when in reality he has King Neptune's crown. And so it's up to SpongeBob and Patrick to find King Neptune's crown and unfreeze Mr. Krabs and free the citizens of Bikini Bottom right before Plankton pretty much takes over everything, which he does turn out to do so in the movie. The second conflict, the second SpongeBob movie's conflict, is that the Krabby Patty formula completely disappears, and basically Bikini Bottom goes absolutely crazy, Mad Mask-esque style, where they're going rogue and they're becoming really wild because they don't have any more Krabby Patty. So it's up to SpongeBob and Plankton to find out where the Krabby Patty formula is.
Yeah. So, in regards to like, we're going into away from our opening, actually going into the different conflicts. So, I'm trying to think. I mean, in regards to, like, I know some people don't really like the SpongeBob SquarePants movie all that much compared to the second one, but I've got to give SpongeBob SquarePants movie credit. I mean, like, at least it goes into, it goes into the conflict and has, some structure to it. You have Plankton with this scam trying to, get the Krabby Patty formula, away from, and he comes up with this, this scheme to get, King Neptune. So, by the way, the one thing I will say, though, in saying that is that King Neptune looks nothing like the King Neptune that we met in the original show.
No, absolutely not.
Which doesn't make much sense. Like,
Yeah, it's a major continuity error, because King Neptune in the SpongeBob SquarePants series is voiced by John O'Hurley, and he has, like, long, luxurious hair, and he is basically very foppish, while King Neptune in the movie is the complete opposite, where he's constantly worried about his bald head, and that's the reason why he wears his crown. And we see this much, much later on, like years later, that King Neptune in the animated series has a son named Triton, while King Neptune in the movie has a daughter named Mandy. So, yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, when it comes to, like, continuity in SpongeBob SquarePants, you shouldn't really be complaining about it, because SpongeBob has always been inconsistent when it comes to its continuity. So, Yeah, I mean, the fact that we have two completely different King Neptunes. And here's the thing, this is the only time in which we see this interpretation of King Neptune, because throughout the series, we see the John O'Hurley version of King Neptune. So, yeah, I think that with that said, I mean, what do you think about this King Neptune compared to the series King Neptune?
I don't like him. Like, it's like he's your typical, like, I'm the authority figure, and like I really don't care about the context of things. Like, like he tried to punish the royal crown polisher. The fact that that's his freaking job for taking the crown. Like, it's like, it's just and then it's up to the princess to, like, let him go. And again, like, I know SpongeBob SquarePants' world is supposed to be kind of like, really like, incompetent, and like not where that doesn't make that much sense. But like, I would say that the King Neptune that we had in the original show, I think, was probably a lot better than the one we ended up with in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect for Jeffrey Tambor, he did do a pretty good job with his acting, but yeah, I think that in terms of, like, this King Neptune, where, I mean, he does have a bit of a sensitive side towards his daughter, where unlike in the animated series, that even though he does misses his son, the only reason why he was upset with him is because, well, actually, it's pretty similar. You see, in both the animated series and in the movie, they're disappointed with their children because they're not ruthless. Like, Mandy is very kind-hearted, and she's very sweet, and she wants to be able to rule, the underwater ocean in a very kind and, very gentle way. Well, Trident was actually banished to another island because he wasn't able to live up to his father's ruthless legacy. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's the only thing that's very similar between the two characters, but yeah, I think that I actually like Mandy a lot more than Trident, because Trident was actually a jerk throughout the entire SpongeBob special. And Scarlett Johansson does a really good job playing as Mandy, being like very sweet and supportive and helping SpongeBob and Patrick when they're
don't get me wrong. If I could switch out the Neptunes and keep Mandy, then I would happily do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd be happy to do. But yeah, just it's I just, in a way, like, King Neptune, and it'd be kind of like one of our antagonists in a way. When you think about it, like, and he didn't really, like, turn around until finally, like, it was revealed that, well, mind you, we'll get that into the end. But yeah, it's like, Mandy's like he's like the voice of reason in all of this, and which is so I guess that works maybe as a character dynamic, but I got to be honest, it's kind of forced when you really think about it. Okay, of course Mandy's the nice one. Like, of course, dad's the blowhard. Like, oh, hey, here we go.
Well, yeah, what if we've never seen this before?
No, not at all.
Nope, not in Little Mermaid. Nope.
It makes me wonder if that's what they were going for. Like,
that's probably exactly what they were going for.
Yeah. So, in regards to, like, them actually, executing, like, the adventure, so, we've got SpongeBob and Patrick actually going off, on a best friend adventure, on the...
yeah, they're going over to Shell City to find the crown,
Shell City's on the crown. And then, on the other movie, we have SpongeBob and the unlikely duo of SpongeBob and Plankton, actually,
Yeah. The last time that I saw SpongeBob and Plankton together in a way that they had to work together, it was like in the season 1 episode Fun, in which when SpongeBob tried to teach Plankton how to have fun, when in reality Plankton was using him so that he can be able to steal the Krabby Patty formula. So yeah, it was actually a really nice dynamic duo that I didn't really expect. I mean, you have Plankton struggling to say teamwork, and you have him slowly warming up to SpongeBob, but then of course he sneaks into SpongeBob's brain to see if he actually remembers the Krabby Patty formula, and then he transitions into like this cotton candy, like cookie, sugar rush nightmare.
I don't think this came out in 2015, didn't it? This movie.
Yes, it did.
So I mean, like, when was Trolls? Like, I'm trying to remember now. Was it around the same time as?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, because, like, I kind of thinking, like, there was too many comparisons to, like, oh, hey, this looks overly cutesy, and it looks in a particular style, and it kind of makes me think, was Trolls kind of like, sort of kind of like an inspiration for some of what we're seeing here? In a way, like, like, the only other thing I can think of is, like, the Land of Chocolate in Homer Simpson's, where Dream when he...
or that Sugar Rush scene in Gravity Falls, in which Mabel eats all the Fun Dip and then she goes, like, all crazy, or her imagination.
Well, do you remember, I was somewhat comparing it to, what was it, the, when she was in that bubble in the finale of Gravity Falls, when,
she was trapped inside of her mind in Gravity Falls because Bill Cipher was trying to prevent Dipper and Wendy to go inside and rescue her because she was the one who had the key to prevent Bill Cipher from like taking over everything. So yeah.
Yeah, so though it kind of reminded us all of that. Also, the dreaded AVGN, happy level that we always compare it to in the AVGN video game.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we were wrong. Trolls came out in 2016, so this came out a year after the SpongeBob Out of Water movie.
Okay, then maybe I don't know if they're like either aware of each other during production. I don't know, but
I have no idea. I mean, to be fair, Trolls has been around for a long time. I mean, like toys. So maybe there was a correlation to that, but I have no idea. But yeah, sugary stuff like that was, pretty tropey at that point.
Mm-hmm. So we have so I guess which dynamic did you actually enjoy watching? I mean, watching SpongeBob and Patrick kind of like doing their goofy stuff, or like being their goofy goobers, or do we enjoy like SpongeBob and Plankton like having that unlikely duo kind of like adventure?
Well, I mean, the SpongeBob and Plankton one didn't last as long as SpongeBob and Patrick because if you remember, like towards I would say like toward the second act or leading up to the third, that was when Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and Sandy started teaming up together. So SpongeBob and Plankton didn't last as long as SpongeBob and Patrick, where they were together throughout the entire course of the film. I mean, they did everything together. They were walking over to like the saloon, and then they reach over to the ditch, and they had to go down, and they had to run away from like the crazy monster that was disguising herself as an old lady, and then they got into Shell City, and then they were almost about to die. So. And then they finally got a ride from David Hasselhoff. Well, in SpongeBob and Plankton, they did go through like the bubble because SpongeBob knew that Plankton was not the one who stole the formula. Then they freed Karen so that they can be able to build the time machine. And then, like I would say, like when they found out about like, okay, now we have the scene in which when they found out that the formula that they took from the past was not the real formula, and then they kind of like put two and two together about like SpongeBob smells the Krabby Patty aroma from the surface, and so then it just kind of like drops Plankton, and then we focus more on SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and Sandy in the third act.
Oh, I'm going to say once we get to that point, like the second movie actually becomes a bit of a mess. I think the second movie kind of unravels towards coming towards the final third. But in regards to SpongeBob, in regards to SpongeBob SquarePants movie, I mean that kind of remains kind of consistent because I mean you got SpongeBob and Patrick going through like these pretty much these trials going outside of the outside of the areas of Bikini Bottom, and then you've got this bounty hunter chasing after them as they go along, and you can see him just leaving everything in the dust while SpongeBob and Patrick struggling for all these these dangerous obstacles that they have to go through. And then you get the bit where Mandy does catch up to them and then realizes that they're struggling pretty badly, so she decides to use her so-called mermaid magic to turn them into men. So,
yes.
So then at least there's some linearage to the SpongeBob story, going all the way up through into the final third. But in regards to Sponge out of water, it kind of mixes the narration with the actual story, and then the narrator ends up end up being the antagonist of of the movie, which is kind of that's just really just kind of strange, and it's a bit mixed up really.
So we found out that Burger Beard was the antagonist, and the book that he had gotten from the beginning of the movie. This is the first thing that we saw where Burger Beard was actually wanting to get a book that a skeleton was holding, and he was reading it, and it was like, okay, this is the story of SpongeBob, and a bunch of seagulls are surrounding him, and then it turns out that he can actually control the characters of Bikini Bottom to his wants and with his needs. So he ended up stealing the Krabby Patty formula. He ended up turning Bikini Bottom into a post-apocalyptic nightmare. He was the one who ended up with writing the characters into Pelican Island when they were getting really close to him. So yeah, he was the one controlling the entire plot of the movie.
I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't like it. It tried to come across as clever, but I just feel like it was just a bit of a mess, really. The way that they kind of put it all together, they should have been some kind of hint. I think at the very beginning when you got the book, it has some kind of magical ability to like do all this stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it just doesn't. And like it says even when you like wrote the end and like threw it away. Like I mean, I don't get it. Like it's shouldn't have like ended like the whole story or whatever, or like
I mean, there was a joke about that, but then the seagulls were like, "No, we don't want that ending. What's the real ending?" And so Burger Beard continued reading the story.
But
Well, in the
he didn't have any reason to like continue on doing that. Like it was just
I mean, exactly. He could have just like shooed them away, like he did the second time, in which he wrote. I'm sorry, he read. A nicer, softer way, where that's when they came together and they were going to, form a team. And then they were like, "No, we need to know what happens next. Tell us more." And then Burger Beer decided that he was going to shoo them away by pulling out wings under a cloche and saying, "This is Kyle," and then everybody flew away. But in reality, Kyle was just in the outhouse bathroom, and then he just shooed him away. And then that's when he basically just took over he took over the entire world. Well, not the world. I mean, I guess it's in California, in like a particular beach spot where he was serving everybody Krabby Patties.
Yeah, it was a mess. Like I didn't like it, and
yeah, and the funny thing is that was the stuff that was the most heavily promoted in the trailers. It was making it look like, okay, they're going to be in the surface throughout the course of the movie, because we saw very early on about their super abilities, and it was even in the posters.
Yeah.
This was going to happen.
But mind you,
so the whole thing about like the Krabby Patty formula disappearing and all the 2D stuff, I mean, that's not anywhere in the posters. The superhero stuff was the one that was the most heavily promoted.
Exactly, yeah, and but I mean we'll get to that bit in a bit. But in regards to like the thing is that the second movie, I feel like it's just kind of rehashing what happened in the first movie, because if you remember, SpongeBob and Patrick do end up in the real world,
yes.
Up there, obviously not in 3D form, that they promoted in the Sponge Out of Water, but this is, I mean, what happened in Out of Water is not necessarily too different from what happened to SpongeBob and Patrick when they went the first time.
I mean, they actually stayed a little bit longer in the second movie, because when they went to Shell City, they were immediately captured and they were being dried up into that gift shop. And then when they finally arose, when this huge Deus Ex Machina moment happening with everybody's crying, and then the tears of the Goopy Goober was able to short circuit an electric wire, and then it caused a fire, and then the fire sprinklers revive SpongeBob and Patrick, and then they immediately head out to the beach where they meet up with David Hasselhoff. So they didn't stay that long in the surface, and then they got the crown, and then they were able to just go back underwater. Well, here in the second movie, they did stay throughout the third act, and there's a dolphin who apparently is like the leader of the cosmos and watching over the galaxy for 10,000 years. And he gave them the ability to breathe underwater, even though that technically SpongeBob and Plankton ruined the future where Saturn and Jupiter crashed together.
Yeah, so I mean, in regards to that, I mean, by the way, we haven't even explained Bubbles yet, this dolphin yet. We haven't even got to that, but people will be listening to this thinking, what the fuck are they talking about? So here's the thing. So SpongeBob and Plankton build a time machine out of a photo booth. Okay, you just go with us with this, okay? They build this machine. It would make Doc Brown cry. They made the way they made it, but they end up traveling different parts of of the future. So they travel 4 days into the future, when the actual thing it makes it look like he's hundreds of years into the future, because of
exactly, because Patrick has this long beard that would make Gandalf weep, and everything in Bikini Bottom is covered in sand, looking like something from Dune, and then he's like, "How far have we gone to the future?" It's like, "It's been only 4 days, and we're in the Krabby Patty famine." It's like, what?
Oh man!
Really?
So
4 days? You guys are out of your minds.
So they travel again, and then I think the third place that they end up in is finally this alternate it doesn't even sound like they even travel through time. It looks like they travel to an alternate reality where Bubbles happens to be looking over the universe.
This was never shown in the series, in which you have a dolphin who's basically the watcher of the universe, and so Yeah, Bubbles has been watching for eons, and then he decides, oh, I haven't taken a bathroom break in thousands of years. Can you watch over the galaxy while I go? And so they watch for like a few seconds, and then Jupiter and Saturn collide with each other. And then Bubbles was like, I will now end your lives. And then he shoots out a laser from his blowhole, and then they decided, go with it. Go with it.
Oh,
and then they decided that they were going to go back in time again. And finally, they were able to reach the point in which Plankton was stealing the formula inside of the safe. And SpongeBob was trying to go after him. And then finally, we have SpongeBob reaching for the safe to grab the formula, Plankton talking to the SpongeBob from the past, asking about, like, what's it like in the future? But unfortunately, SpongeBob got the wrong bottle. It was the bottle that Plankton put in to fool Krabs into thinking that that was the actual formula. And so then chaos ensues once again.
Yeah. So, so basically that whole time travel thing was, in a way, I guess, a waste of time. You know, like, just like they didn't achieve doing anything, and then, you know, they try and force in this whole, like, you know, did you notice, like, once that had happened, and, like, you know, SpongeBob went on this speech, and, like, I guarantee you, they wrote this thing thinking that this was going to be, like, you know, as, like, you know, some kind of political statement or something like that, saying, oh, hey, we all live, like, these individual, like, lives on, like, on little islands and stuff like that, and it's like, you know, it's like, yeah, that's sort of true, but it's like, come on, guys, this is SpongeBob SquarePants. It's not a freaking, you know, political thriller. You know, like, it's. I just felt like they were so forced in when they made SpongeBob put that statement.
Had these speech. Well, to be fair, SpongeBob has always had these kind of motivational speeches where he's trying to bring out the worst in people, or in this case, fish, whenever they act really, really stupid or really, really selfish. So it is within character, yes. But yeah, I would agree with you in saying, like, the whole time machine thing where they just, you know, went back. I mean, the only reason why it worked in terms of the plot was because they saw Bubbles again. Because when they reach up to the surface and they were like, oh, we can't go this far because we can't breathe. But then I was like, but Sandy's over there. Maybe she can go and grab, you know, find out where the formula is. Or maybe SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward can maybe get their helmets and see if they can get up there. But then Bubbles appears and he's like, I thank you for freeing me from watching over the cosmos. And for that, I'm going to give you the ability to breathe underwater. So yeah, basically, Bubbles is a plot device.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as opposed to, like, in the first movie. You remember we were talking about the first movie as well.
Oh, yeah, we were.
Yeah. So, there wasn't really too much of, like, a... I mean, I guess with Mandy, it's like, you would argue that she's, like, a plot device as well. But no, I mean... The first of all, she didn't use, like, real magic to make SpongeBob and Patrick into men. She was building up their confidence, saying, you can do it because I believe in you. And the stuff that she was giving in terms of, like, the mustaches, that wasn't her real magic. She doesn't even have magic at all.
But mind you, like, when you argue that, you know, once they went and did that, like, and then they went into, like, the whole musical of, like, you know, now that we're men, like, I gotta be honest with you, I remember that song far more than I remember whatever the song that, you know, SpongeBob and Plankton was singing about in regards to, like,
yeah,
teamwork.
Like that whole, like, teamwork thing. I mean, that's the thing about the second movie that's a bit of a fault, is that the music in the second movie is nowhere near as memorable as the first. In fact, some of the jokes aren't even as memorable as the first either.
Yeah, like, I can barely remember. The only one that really sticks out in my mind is, like, when they, you know, we're gonna get to the point where, like, they randomly turn into superheroes. Like, you know, like...
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the only thing that people remember about the second movie, is that...
Because it was heavily promoted in, like, all the trailers and stuff. Like, this is what we were expected to see.
It was in the promotions. It was in the commercials. It's even in the poster. It's even on the DVD and Blu-ray.
Yeah, like, you know, talk about false advertising. Like, you know, like, like, we went through an hour pretty much of, you know, what they would probably normally do on SpongeBob SquarePants on the actual TV show. And then finally, maybe at the very end, we finally get to, like, something different. You know,
yep, like, and, I mean... false advertisement, am I right?
Yeah, like,
so, yeah,
at least give credit to the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. At least I remember in the promotional material, at least it stuck to it. You know, like, and then, like, them going off into, like, you know, the real world was actually somewhat of a surprise. And, like, you know, having David Hasselhoff in there was also somewhat kind of surprising as well. Do you remember when it first came out? And then everyone's like, oh my god, David Hasselhoff's in this movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And this was like Baywatch David Hasselhoff. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, and like it was at the point where they were saying, oh hey, David Hasselhoff is back, is he going to be the next Doctor Who? Is he going to be like, he just took off after that, like he was going to be in like all sorts of things after that,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Where I mean, it kind of like after his run on Baywatch, I mean, other than his appearance, before his appearance in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, and then after his run on Baywatch, he wasn't really in a lot of things.
yeah, there's a lot more positive. I mean, some people are going to think we're crazy, but I got to be honest with you. Like in regards to the story structure, I think the SpongeBob SquarePants movie has a hell of a lot more going for it than Sponge Out of Water. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, now here's the thing. I mean, I would say that with the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, there are a lot more memorable scenes in terms of like when SpongeBob and Patrick go over to like different locations. Everybody remembers the saloon scene in which when SpongeBob and Patrick are washing their hands and then a whole bunch of bubbles are around when they're in this really tough bar. Everybody remembers the scene in which when they go into the gorge and they go under, they see this old woman holding ice cream and it turns out it was a giant monster trying to trick them by eating them, and they're going through like a sea of bones. And then there's also Dennis. So we didn't even mention Dennis throughout the portion of our discussion, where Dennis was the bounty hunter that was hired by Plankton to prevent them from going over to Shell City. And funny enough, he's voiced by Bruce Willis. So a year after he did the train wreck that was the Rugrats Go Wild movie, he did this as the tough, bounty hunter. And I was like, okay, I guess Bruce Willis had like still confidence from Nickelodeon saying, yeah, we're not going to cast you into something that sucks.
So I guess we're getting into the final acts, I think, of both movies, and so in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, basically the way that it kind of ends up is that SpongeBob and Patrick do get the crown, and they meet up with David Hasselhoff. They go on like this swim, and then David Hasselhoff uses his pecs to like launch SpongeBob and Patrick down into the water, which I thought was hilarious, and
it was great.
Yeah, and then they have him floating like in the water, and like he ends up getting like blasted by King Neptune, which was pretty hilarious.
Yeah,
in itself.
yeah. You remember? Oh, by the way, you remember a few years ago? I think we talked about this in the Aaron Menta show, where David Hasselhoff was selling a lot of his memorabilia, and one of them was actually the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Like physical
oh yeah,
figure
like
of him.
the Hasselhoff boat. Yeah, like
yes.
What happened to that?
I don't know. I somebody who has a lot of money must have bought it.
I guarantee you, I bet you it's like in the Ripley's Believe It or Not museum somewhere. I kind of think it's probably...
Oh, possibly.
Yeah, it won't
maybe,
surprise me.
They'll probably donate it to a museum in the future, kind of like what they did with, like, the Good Burger Mobile, in which, like, after they were done filming it, it was, like, left abandoned somewhere for decades until somebody found it and actually restored it and donated it to a museum.
Yeah. You know what is going to be hilarious? Like, if you and I end up going to, like, back to the Ripley's Believe It or Not in Florida, and then we see there's the David Hasselhoff, like, model from, like, SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yes, that'd be so great.
Oh, that'd be so awesome, yeah.
I would love that so much. Oh man, I miss St. Augustine. We need to go back.
Tell you guys in the comment section below. Tell us if you know where that model is. Tell us where it is. Like we'd really like to know. Like
yes, please.
Yeah. So. Okay, so anyway, so that's like the going on in the final act of the movie. The final act of Sponge Out of Water. I gotta be honest with everybody, it's Marvel junk. Like it's like
oh my God. But yeah, I mean, you have like them being a super. I mean, this is 2015, so we had this was like post the Avengers. This was like before Age of Ultron, I would say. So we had like a lot of superhero movies that were trying to cash in on Marvel's popularity. So I guess they were definitely going into that direction. So you have like SpongeBob, who is controlling bubbles, and then Squidward is playing really bad notes with his clarinet. You have Sandy, who turns into a humanoid, larger version of a squirrel. You have a robotic Krabs, who launches his claws.
Yeah, so Mr. Krabs is Iron Man, basically, in this.
Yes, Mr. Krabs is Iron Man. And then Patrick... he launches ice cream out with his mind powers.
Yeah, it's just Patrick is probably the worst character in this whole in Sponge Out of Water. I despise Patrick.
Oh man, like, he betrays SpongeBob and Plankton's loyalty. He calls them out. He doesn't want to join up with them, and then when he does, and something bad happens, he's like, "Can I go over to the different team?" He is a coward, and he is just not very loyal. And then his power in the third act is useless.
How the hell did this character get his own spin-off series?
Oh my god! Don't remind me. By the way,
exactly, yeah, and hopefully they'll take a look at it somewhere down the line, and say, "Oh, it's not as good as SpongeBob SquarePants," so dump. But
anyway, the thing that I definitely commend the second movie for was that Burger Beard was hilarious. I did like Antonio Banderas' over the top shenanigans. I thought that was pretty funny.
Well, I liked him in the beginning, but I don't know, like, during the final act, I was just kind of like, oh, to be honest with you though, I mean, this is Antonio Banderas' fault. Like, it's not the fact that he has to play like,
No. He's a great actor.
He's a great actor.
He does a wonderful job playing as this over the top pirate. I was talking about that.
Yeah.
As for his story structure, I mean, yeah, it definitely kind of just falls apart in the third act.
The one thing I will give it credit for in the final act, the cinematography in this act is actually pretty good, and they got Antonio Banderas like do like the whole like he's getting thrown around in the ship and everything. When Plankton picks it up and like starts throwing it around and stuff like that. Like that those bits were good when he was doing all of that. And but in regards to like his his motivation as a villain, I think in regards to like wanting the Krabby Patty for himself because he wants his own, burger place to become successful, like on in the surface world. I mean, I can get into that, but I just think that they should have been more structure and put more meat put into this. Like if he was going to be the villain of the movie, they should have given from the very beginning made it kind of look like, oh hey, maybe this guy could be the villain of the movie, but kind of kept people guessing. In that,
it did kind of start off that way towards the second act, where we're like, oh man, this thing completely disappeared. What happened? I mean, at first I thought it was a hologram, but then it was like, no, the Krabby Patty is gone, and then we were wondering who took the formula. Was it Plankton who was just lying this entire time? But then we found out, no, it's Burger Beard, and the only reason why he was able to take it was because of this book.
How interesting would it have been if the Burger Beard had said, oh, I've got this Krabby Patty secret formula, but then just kept kind of planting it on Plankton. Because, Plankton is and it would be so easy to plant it on him because he was the one who was always stealing the formula. And Burger Beard would have known about that because he's reading the book. So, I just feel like, if you had, I say at the beginning of the movie, the way they should have played it out is that, he was going to, steal this secret book, and he didn't know what was in it, but then he picked it up and started reading it, and then realized, oh, hey, this is the story of SpongeBob SquarePants, and then he started, during the movie, while the whole story is playing out, he schemes, I mean, I don't really, I mean, do you mind if I spoil something that you and I are playing right now? At the moment,
yes, go for it.
Okay, so there's a game called Doki Doki Literature Club, and the character Monica in the game is basically she is the one who's messing around with the scripts in the game, making all the characters go crazy and kill each other and stuff like that.
Wait, what?
Exactly, yeah. So sorry, babe, I just spoiled that for you. But
what? Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah, and so it's kind of like that. I would even like it if they played Burger Beard kind of like that, not killing all the characters. Of course not. But the way I would have played it out is that it would have been Burger Beard has the book, and he would innocently kind of reading out the story and stuff like that. But then halfway through he realizes, oh wait, maybe I could get that Krabby Patty speaker for me for myself, and then he can make all the Krabby Patties and then make money for himself, and then pin the whole thing on Plankton. And that would have been a good way of going about it, at least in my opinion. So that's the way I would have gone about it in regards to turning Burger Beard into a villain. But I just feel like they made a bit of a mess of it, really, doing that. So, yeah. But in regards to, I mean, that's the reason why I say the SpongeBob SquarePants movie has better story structure than Sponge Out of Water, because with Sponge Out of Water, when we get to the final act, you wouldn't think it was the same movie.
I mean, here's the thing that a lot of people were kind of telling me that, I disagree with your statement that, Sponge Out of Water was inferior to SpongeBob SquarePants the movie. It's now if you like the second movie more, then that's perfectly fine, and I have nothing to say about it. But I would have to say that when it comes to the third act and when it comes to that climactic battle with with SpongeBob and Plankton taking that last bit of the Gooby Goober spirit, and then finally where he plays the Gooby Goober rock song, even though that it's not an original song, but I still remember it a lot more, where you have like the different styles of animation, and the presentation was like really over the top, and he was able to defeat Plankton with the power of rock and roll. It may sound kind of stupid, but it was actually pretty awesome. Well, I mean, in paper, when it comes to like the second movie, you would think that, oh man, you have this big climactic fight with SpongeBob and the gang and fighting off Burger Beard using superpowers. Doesn't that sound awesome? It's almost like the episode with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, when Barnacle Boy turns evil and then Mermaid Man needs to call in the IJLSA, and they have SpongeBob, what was it? SpongeBob, Squidward, Patrick, and Sandy put on these costumes to take down Barnacle Boy, Man Ray, and the Dirty Bubble. In fact, that would have been an interesting callback if they would have actually had the costumes from the IJLSA to have it, where SpongeBob is the Quickster, and Squidward is like the volcano one, and Patrick can be able to stretch, and Sandy can turn invisible. I would have loved to have seen that callback, but I guess they wanted to make it more akin to what their characters are. So I guess that's fine, but it's just nowhere near as good. Like, oh man, like, wouldn't it have been amazing if we would have had those old costumes again? Coming back from a classic episode of SpongeBob. But I think
it wouldn't make much sense. But how much fun would it have been if like Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy had like just suddenly appeared, like, at the final moment when like it all looks like it's lost. Like that would have been.
That would have been so good. Like, I mean, that actually makes me wonder about like Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. I think they're like mermen because even though that they look humanoid, they're actually like mermen. Like in the name Merman, Mermaid Man, and Barnacle Boy. But I think that wouldn't have been possible because Ernest Borgnine, who played as Mermaid Man, passed away in 2012, 3 years before the movie came out. So I don't think that would have happened. I mean, maybe if he was still alive, that could have been possible.
Oh, well. So, yeah, but, so, one thing I will say that about, a positive thing I will say about, SpongeBob out of water at the very end is that, Plankton gives back the formula because he realizes how much damage is actually done, like it being missing this entire time. So, I mean, I guess we got some character progression out of Plankton. But obviously he goes back to like say wanting to steal the formula again because that's his thing.
This is I mean that was such a disappointment. It's like going into that old tired trope about like okay, we need to like reset the formula. I mean, not like the Krabby Patty formula. I'm talking about like recycle the same old formula for a show. It's like, okay, the bad guy becomes good, but then they turn bad in the next episode. It's like, give me a break.
The way I would have explained it away is that, like, all this mess has been made and, like, all this chaos has now been created, and one thing I would have, like, maybe said is that, let's make the book, let's write on the page, like, to reset everything so that, not everyone remembers, like, the events of what happened, and so, like, take some of the trauma away from everybody, maybe. And so then, of course, Plankton is going to go back to stealing the formula again because, everyone's minds are raised and like they just reset them back to like before all of this happened, so of course they're going to go back to that. That's one way I would have gone about it. I would have thought like everything just kind of goes back to normal, which to be honest with you, like it's will be a bit disappointing because that means like nothing, we basically just sat through a movie and nothing's progressed in a way, but I mean that's kind of like what SpongeBob SquarePants is there, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised if that's the way that they would end. They don't even end it at that. Like everyone's still pretty clear that the Bikini Bottom basically hit the poop hit the fan and it turned into like Mad Max world for a while, and so people have still got that in their clear memories, and but yeah, again like a Sponge Out of Water is out of its depth in regards to telling a story. I'm really surprised I'm saying this, but I prefer the first one over the second one. After looking back,
yeah, I do. I mean, I've always preferred the first one over the second one. Even I said so in the beginning when I said that whenever it comes to like the jokes, I don't remember like a joke that like immediately stands out. The one thing that I mean, there are a couple of them, sure, but not like ones compared to the first movie. I mean, it's kind of funny because I even said this like many years when I talked about the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, but I always felt that the SpongeBob SquarePants movie was kind of like an homage to Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah, but the thing is that people have been telling me like how good the second one actually is, and I thought because remember we actually did it on an episode of Aaron and Patricia, I think a while back ago, where we said, oh hey, the Sponge Out of Water is actually getting good reviews. You know, like
Yes.
yeah. So like, I'm quite surprised that I finally got to see it. And it's kind of like, huh? It's not that great actually. You know, so
Yeah, I do give props to Steven Hillenburg because over a decade after he left the SpongeBob SquarePants movie and said he was never going to go back to like SpongeBob like full front, he was just going to be an executive producer overseeing things. He finally decided to come back and work with Paul Tibbett to write the story and put together what would be the plot of this movie. So I mean, this is the last time that I think that he also did help with like consulting for the Broadway musical, but in terms of like writing like a story or something, I think this was like the last time he did it right before he passed away a few years later.
okay. So, we are going to decide which movie is the one that is going to survive and which one is going to go into the pit of doom. So, right. So, I mean, I got to be honest. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie, it has better story structure. It has a lot more memorable things. It has David Hasselhoff in it, and even though the negatives that go towards it in regards to King Neptune and in regards to like some, maybe aspects in regards to the way the way it's drawn, but the live action bit does catch you out by surprise, and it does have like a somewhat good ending. Also, it kind of progress. I mean, it doesn't progress in the TV show, but it does kind of like progress the story because SpongeBob SquarePants does actually end up becoming manager of the Krusty Krab 2 at the very end, and ends up becoming more
even
mature
though
character.
that the Krusty Krab 2 never shows up in the TV series or even in the other movies again.
And in a way, it is progression. So like, regardless if the
It
other
is
movies
true.
don't,
It is progression, yes.
yeah. So I got to be honest with you, Patricia. My vote goes towards keeping the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, and throwing the sponge out of water into the pit of doom.
I would actually, I mean, in terms of like our discussion for these two movies, I would agree. But when it comes to like all three SpongeBob movies that have been currently out, I've heard that the third one is even worse.
Okay, well, we'll get to that at another time. So, but
Yes, we'll get to that in another time. But yeah, I mean, I would say that when it comes to like comparing both of these movies, that even though that the first movie's plot was a lot more simpler than the second movie, where it tries to like really up its ante, I think that the structure of the first movie is more tighter because it has a clear motivation and it has a consistent pace. And also, it has a great set of jokes. It has a lot of heartwarming moments. And it also has a great climactic ending. And it also has a really satisfying ending, too, where SpongeBob becomes the manager of the second Krusty Krab. And with the second one, I mean, they really like up the ante immediately with like, oh, we're gonna go from the Krabby Patty formula being missing to like Mad Max post-apocalyptic world in like seconds. So yeah, I mean, at least there was a reason why in the first movie it was post-apocalyptic because Plankton took over, as opposed to like we need Krabby Patties, we can't survive without it, we're gonna go insane, and then Sandy turns into a conspiracy nut. It's like, okay, I wanted to see another conspiracy nut on Search of the Crystal Skull. Okay, I guess I wanted that.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I mean, in the first movie, it actually made sense on why the whole world was going to hell, and with the team up with SpongeBob and Patrick, at least Patrick is much more manageable and less stupid compared to the second movie where he was just like a jerk and he betrayed his friends and then the superpower that he got was just completely useless. Yes, Patrick is still like the dumb, lovable idiot in the first movie, but at least he was trying to help out SpongeBob with trying to get the crown, even though that he didn't need to. I mean, why would he? But he's best friends with SpongeBob, and they're going to work together to do this. And yeah, there was a lot of more funny moments, like that scene with the Gooby Goober where they get themselves quote unquote drunk off of ice cream, and the saloon scene and the scene in the gorge and all that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of good things in the first movie. In the second movie, sure, there's some decent things, but I wouldn't say that much compared to the first movie. And then the soundtrack. Oh man, I mean, come on, Ocean Man, anybody? Yeah, I thought so.
Mm-hmm. So, congratulations, SpongeBob SquarePants movie. You have survived the pit of doom. So, we are going to rate SpongeBob SquarePants movie now. So, in regards to that, I think to be honest with you, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, I think is a solid 7. I think in regards to how I feel about that. So.
I mean, we gave Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius an 8, and I'm trying to think about like, okay, we gave it an 8 on its own merits. But with SpongeBob, with this being like, this was originally supposed to be like the last thing that SpongeBob was ever going to release. This was supposed to be the climactic ending to a show that lasted for a decent amount of years, and then this was supposed to like cap it all off and ended in a very satisfying way until Nickelodeon decided, no, we're gonna milk this cash cow for all it's worth. So I would say, in terms of like at the time where SpongeBob was back when it only had like a few seasons and it was consistently funny and it was able to definitely up the ante compared to what the series had the show had to offer, especially in its first 3 seasons. I would probably give it an 8 because I think that the stuff that it does have, it definitely is to its advantage. The only thing that I say that the second movie did better than the first was that it actually told an origin story about like SpongeBob to ease kids who probably had never seen SpongeBob. That's one of the very few things that I would give the second movie credit.
Okay. So I guess we're giving it a 7.5. So yeah.
Yeah, 7.5, and I think it's pretty solid.
Cool. Okay. So that is finally the end of Nicktoons Movie Month. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll let you know what the next month is going to be themed on. So
yeah.
Okay. All right. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you for further adventures of In Search of the Crystal Skull.
Take care, everyone.